Greetings, fellow adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Hello, YouTube friends. Join us as we unravel the mysteries surrounding architecture of New York City. The building form most closely associated with New York City is the skyscraper, which has shifted many commercial and residential districts from low-rise to high-rise. Surrounded mostly by water, the city has amassed one of the largest and most varied collection of skyscrapers in the world. New York has architecturally significant buildings in a wide range of styles spanning distinct historical and cultural periods. These include the Woolworth Building 1913, an early Gothic revival skyscraper with large-scale Gothic architectural detail. The 1916 zoning resolution required setback in new buildings and restricted towers to a percentage of the lot size to allow sunlight to reach the streets below. The Art Deco design of the Chrysler Building 1930 and Empire State Building 1931, with their tapered tops and steel spires, reflected the zoning requirements. The Chrysler Building is considered by many historians and architects to be one of New York's finest, with its distinctive ornamentation such as V-shaped lighting inserts capped by a steel spire at the tower's crown. Early influential examples of the international style in the United States are 330 West 42nd Street 1931 and the Seagram Building 1958. The Condé Nast Building 2000 is an important example of green design in American skyscrapers. The character of New York's large residential districts is often defined by the elegant brownstone row houses, townhouses, and tenements that were built during a period of rapid expansion from 1870 to 1930. In contrast, New York City also has neighborhoods that are less densely populated and feature freestanding dwellings. In the outer boroughs, large single-family homes are common in various architectural styles such as Tudor Revival and Victorian. Split two-family homes are also widely available across the outer boroughs, for example in the Flushing area. Stone and brick became the city's building materials of choice after the construction of wood frame houses was limited in the aftermath of the Great Fire of 1835. Unlike Paris, which for centuries was built from its own limestone bedrock, New York has always drawn its building stone from a far-flung network of quarries, and its stone buildings have a variety of textures and hues. A distinctive feature of many of the city's buildings is the presence of wooden roof-mounted water towers. In the 19th century, the city required their installation on buildings higher than 6 stories to prevent the need for excessively high water pressures at lower elevations, which could burst municipal water pipes. Garden apartments became popular during the years in outlying areas, including Jackson Heights in Queens, which became more accessible with expansion of the subway. TOC. Let's now turn our gaze towards concentrations of buildings and explore the fascinating connections it has to offer. New York has two main concentrations of high-rise buildings, Midtown Manhattan and Lower Manhattan, each with its own uniquely recognizable skyline. Midtown Manhattan, the largest central business district in the world, is home to such notable buildings as the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, and Citigroup Center, as well as the Rockefeller Center complex. Lower Manhattan comprises the third largest central business district in the United States after Midtown and Chicago's Loop. Lower Manhattan was characterized by the omnipresence of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center from its completion in 1973 until its destruction in the September 11 attacks in 2001. In the first decade of the 21st century, Lower Manhattan saw reconstruction, which included one World Trade Center within the new World Trade Center complex. The downtown skyline received new designs from such architects as Santiago Calatrava and Frank Gehry. In 2010, the 749th, 43-story tower named 200 West Street was built for Goldman Sachs across the street from the World Trade Center site. New York City has a long history of tall buildings. It has been home to 10 buildings that have held the world's tallest fully habitable building title at some point in history, although half have since been demolished. The first building to bring the world's tallest title to New York was the New York World Building in 1890. Later, New York City was home to the world's tallest building for 75 continuous years, starting with the Park Row Building in 1899 and ending with One World Trade Center upon completion of the Sears Tower in 1974. The 1899 Park Row Building, one of the world's earliest skyscrapers, is still standing. The high-rise buildings of Brooklyn constitute a third, much smaller skyline. Downtown Brooklyn is also experiencing an extensive building boom, with new high-rise luxury residential towers, commercial space, and a new arena in the planning stages. The building boom in Brooklyn has had a great deal of opposition from local civic and environmental groups which contend that Brooklyn needs to maintain its human scale. The borough of Queens has also been developing its own skyline in recent years with One Court Square, formerly the Citigroup Building, currently the tallest building in NYC outside Manhattan, and the Queens West development of several residential towers along the East River waterfront. The 1916 zoning resolution required setback in new buildings and restricted towers to a percentage of the lot size to allow sunlight to reach the streets below. Moving on to the next segment, we have history. The skyscraper, which has shaped Manhattan's distinctive skyline, has been closely associated with New York City's identity since the end of the 19th century. From 1890 to 1973, the title of world's tallest building resided continually in Manhattan, with a gap between 1894 and 1908, when the title was held by Philadelphia City Hall, with 8 different buildings holding the title. The New York World Building on Park Row was the first to take the title in 1890, standing 309 foot until 1955, when it was demolished to construct a new ramp to the Brooklyn Bridge. The nearby Park Row Building, with its 29 stories standing 391 foot high, became the world's tallest office building when it opened in 1899. Turning our focus to early 20th century, let's explore its key elements. The 41-story Singer Building, constructed in 1908 as the headquarters of the eponymous sewing machine manufacturer, stood 612 foot high until 1967, when it became the tallest building ever demolished. The Metropolitan Life Insurance Company Tower, standing 700 foot at the foot of Madison Avenue, wrested the title of world's tallest building in 1909, with a tower reminiscent of St. Mark's Campanile in Venice. The Woolworth Building and its distinctive Gothic architecture took the title in 1913, topping off at 792 foot. Structures such as the Equitable Building of 1915, which rises vertically 40 stories from the sidewalk, prompted the passage of the 1916 zoning resolution, requiring new buildings to contain setbacks withdrawing progressively at a defined angle from the street as they rose, in order to preserve a view of the sky at street level. Grand Central Terminal is located in East Midtown close to the Chrysler Building. The railroad terminal, completed in 1913, is the third on its site. It was built in the Beaux Arts style by the firms Reed and Stem and Warren and Wetmore. It became a National Historic Landmark in 1976. The Roaring Twenties saw a race to the sky, with 3 separate buildings pursuing the world's tallest title in the span of a year. As the stock market soared in the days before the Wall Street crash of 1929, 2 developers publicly competed for the crown. At 927th 40 Wall Street, completed in May 1930 in only 11 months as the headquarters of the Bank of Manhattan, seemed to have secured the title. At Lexington Avenue and 42nd Street, auto executive Walter Chrysler and his architect William Van Allen developed plans to build the structure's trademark 185-foot spire in secret, pushing the Chrysler Building to 1046 foot and making it the tallest in the world when it was completed in 1929. Completed in 1930, the Chrysler Building is a distinctive symbol of New York. Originally built for the Chrysler Corporation, The building is presently co-owned by AB Rosen's RFR Holding LLC in a joint venture with the Austrian SIGNA Group. The Chrysler Building was the first structure in the world to surpass the 1,000-foot threshold. Both buildings were soon surpassed with the May 1931 completion of the 102-story Empire State Building, with its tower reaching 1,250 foot at the top of the building. The 203-foot high pinnacle was later added, bringing the total height of the building to 1,453 foot. The Empire State Building, a contemporary Art Deco style building in Midtown Manhattan, was designed by Shreve, Lamb and Harmon and takes its name from the nickname of New York State. It was the first building to go beyond the 100-story mark and has one of the world's most visited observation decks, which sees about 4 million visitors a year. The building was built in just 14 months. 30 Rockefeller Plaza is a slim Art Deco skyscraper and the focal point of Rockefeller Center. It stands 850 to 259 m with 70 floors. Built in 1933 and originally called the RCA Building, it was later called the Comcast Building. The frieze above the main entrance was executed by Lee Laurie and depicts wisdom, along with a phrase from scripture that reads, "Wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times," originally found in the book of Isaiah. 330 West 42nd Street 1931 was the only skyscraper in New York City displayed in Henry Russell Hitchcock and Philip Johnson's influential International Style exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in 1932, and the only other U.S. skyscraper at that exhibition, besides the PSFS building. Johnson, along with Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, later helped build the Seagram Building 1959 on Park Avenue between 52nd and 53rd Streets, with extruded bronze mullions on the facade. Paul Goldberger wrote in the New York Times in 1976 that the Seagram Building was one of New York's most copied buildings, its design having been copied in several structures worldwide. Get ready to uncover the mysteries surrounding late 20th century as we navigate its intriguing terrain. In 1961, the Pennsylvania Railroad unveiled plans to tear down the old Penn Station and replace it with a new Madison Square Garden and office building complex. Organized protests were aimed at preserving the McKim, Mead and White design structure completed in 1910, widely considered a masterpiece of the Beaux Arts style and one of the architectural jewels of New York City. Despite these efforts, demolition of the structure began in October 1963. The loss of Penn Station called an act of irresponsible public vandalism by historian Louis Mumford directly to the enactment in 1965 of a local law establishing the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission, which is responsible for preserving the city's historic, aesthetic, and cultural heritage. The historic preservation movement triggered by Penn Station's demise has been credited with the retention of some 1 million structures nationwide, including over 1,000 in New York City. In 2017, a multi-billion-dollar rebuilding plan was unveiled to restore the historic grandeur of Penn Station, in the process of upgrading the landmark's status as a critical transportation hub. The MetLife Building, formerly the Pan Am Building, was the largest commercial office building in the world when it opened on March 7, 1963. It stands directly north of Grand Central Terminal. The former twin towers of the World Trade Center were located in Lower Manhattan. At 1368 and the 110-story buildings were the world's tallest from 1972 until they were surpassed by the construction of the Willis Tower in 1974, formerly known as the Sears Tower, located in Chicago. One World Trade Center, a replacement for the twin towers of the World Trade Center, is currently the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. Citigroup Center is a 59-story office tower located at 53rd Street and Lexington Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. It is considered one of the most important post-war skyscrapers to be erected in New York City. The striking design of the steeply slanted roof, the sleek aluminum-clad facade, and its base on four stilts over a church also on the site made the skyscraper an instant architectural icon. The sloping roof houses the building's mechanical and ventilation systems. The designers settled on an aluminum-clad facade to reduce the weight load on the building's foundation and support structures, since its entire weight would be supported by stilts. To prevent swaying, a tuned mass damper was later added on the roof. Now let's delve into the intricacies of 21st century and explore its various aspects. Time Warner Center is a mixed-use skyscraper at Columbus Circle on Manhattan's Upper West Side. It was the first major building to be completed since the September 11 attacks. The Condé Nast Building, officially 4 Times Square, is a modern skyscraper in Times Square in Midtown Manhattan and one of the most important examples of green design in skyscrapers in the United States. Environmentally friendly gas-fired absorption chillers, along with high-performing insulating and shading curtain wall, ensure that the building does not need to be heated or cooled for the majority of the year. Office furniture is made with biodegradable and non-toxic materials. The air delivery system provides 50% more fresh air than is required by New York City Building Code, and a number of recycling chutes serve the entire building. Being the first project of its size to undertake these features in construction, the building has received an award from the American Institute of Architects, as well as a New York State. Hearst Tower, located in Midtown Manhattan at 300 West 57th Street, is another example of the new breed of green design skyscrapers in New York City. Hearst Tower is a glass and steel construction skyscraper which rests on the base of the original Hearst Corporation building. Hearst Tower is easily identified by the dramatic interlocking triangular glass panels designed by British architect Lord Norman Foster. Hearst Tower is also the first skyscraper in New York City to be awarded the coveted Gold LEED certified rating by the United States Green Building Council. Brace yourself for a deep dive into tallest buildings as we explore its impact and relevance in our evolving narrative. The 15 tallest standard structures, which include those with the 10 highest antennae or radio towers pinnacles. Constructed as the city's service company building, constructed as the Bank of Manhattan Trust Corporation building. All addresses are in Midtown Manhattan except those in lighter shades, which are in Lower Manhattan. As we progress, let's shine a spotlight on residential architecture and examine its intricate interplay within our topic. 5 Gracie Mansion. Snow Jedge Gracie Mansion, the mayor's official residence. 5 Forest Hills Gardens, Queens, Nijga large single-family home in Forest Hills Gardens, Queens. 5 Fitzgerald Ginsburg Mansion in Flushing, Queens. Tudor Revival-style mansion in Flushing, Queens, constructed in 1924. 5 Historic 88 Bentley New Paint Jaboka home in Tottenville, Staten Island. 5 Howard Beach, one by David Shankbonick houses placed on Howtree Creek in Howard Beach, Queens. 5 Long Island City, New York, May 2015 Panorama Opus Century Residential Towers in Long Island City, Queens. 5 North 4th Complex New York high-rise condominiums on the Williamsburg, Brooklyn waterfront. 5 Sata House Full Oak Queen and Architecture C 1899 in Dyker Heights, Brooklyn. 5 Dakota Dakota Building 1881 on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. 5 Lower East Side tenement buildings in the Lower East Side. 5 Harlem Brownstone townhouses in Harlem. 5 North apartment buildings in Hell's Kitchen. 5 Manhattan House 65 Jedge Manhattan House buildings in the Upper East Side. As New York City grew, it spread outward from where it originally began at the southern tip of Manhattan Island into surrounding areas. In order to house the burgeoning population, farmland and open space in Upper Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island were developed into neighborhoods of brownstones, apartment buildings, multifamily and single-family homes. The density of this new construction generally depended on the area's proximity and accessibility to Manhattan. The development of these areas was often spurred by the opening of bridges and the connection of boroughs via public transportation. For example, the Brooklyn Bridge was completed in 1883 and connects Brooklyn and Manhattan across the East River. Brooklyn Heights, a neighborhood on the Brooklyn waterfront, is often credited as the United States' first suburb. The bridge allowed an easier commute between Brooklyn and Manhattan and spurred rapid construction, development, and redevelopment. The Verrazano Narrows Bridge, completed in 1964, opened up many areas of Staten Island to residential and commercial development, especially in the central and southern parts of the borough, which had previously been largely undeveloped. Staten Island's population doubled from about 221,000 in 1960 to about 443,000 in 2000. By 1870, stone and brick had become firmly established as the building materials of choice, as the construction of wood frame houses had been greatly limited in the aftermath of the Great Fire of 1835. Unlike Paris, which for centuries was built from its own limestone bedrock, New York has always drawn its building stone from a network of quarries, sometimes quite distant, which is evident in the variety of textures and hues of stone seen in the city's buildings. In the days before rail, stones were floated down the Hudson River or along the Atlantic seaboard from pits in New England, while trains brought marble from Vermont and granite from Minnesota. It was Connecticut brownstone that was so popular in the construction of New York's row homes in the late 19th century that the term brownstone became synonymous with row house. Beginning in the early public housing projects dramatically changed the city's appearance. New, large-scale, frequently high-rise residential complexes replaced older communities, at times removing artifacts and landmarks that would now be considered of historic value. During this period, many of these new projects were built in an effort towards urban renewal championed by the famed urban planner Robert Moses. The resulting housing projects have suffered from inconsistent funding, poor maintenance, and high crime, prompting many to consider these projects a failure. A distinctive feature of residential and many commercial buildings in New York City is the presence of wooden roof-mounted water towers, which were required on all buildings higher than 6 stories by city ordinance in the 19th century because the municipal water pipes could not withstand the extraordinarily high pressure necessary to deliver water to the top stories of high-rise buildings. Turning our focus to bridges and tunnels, let's explore its key elements. Philea Bridge in New York City, Bridge 1848 File Brooklyn Bridge 1 Ok Brooklyn Bridge 1883 File Williamsburg Bridge New York Williamsburg Bridge 1903 File Queensboro Bridge New York October 2016 Ok Queensboro Bridge 1909 File Manhattan Bridge June Ok Manhattan Bridge 1909 File A George Washington Bridge from Englewood Basin George Washington Bridge 1931 File Whitestone Bridge 1939. New York City is located on one of the world's largest natural harbors. The boroughs of Manhattan and Staten Island are their own islands, while Queens and Brooklyn are located at the west end of the larger Long Island. This precipitates a need for an extensive infrastructure of bridges and tunnels. Nearly all of the city's major bridges and several of its tunnels have broken or set records. For example, the Holland Tunnel was the world's first vehicular tunnel when it opened in 1927. The Queensboro Bridge is an important piece of cantilever architecture. The towers of the Brooklyn Bridge are built of limestone, granite, and Rosendale cement. Their architectural style is neo-Gothic, with characteristic pointed arches above the passageways through the stone towers. This bridge was also the longest suspension bridge in the world from its opening until 1903, and the first steel wire suspension bridge. The Manhattan Bridge, Twiggs Neck Bridge, Triborough Bridge, and Verrazano Narrows Bridge are all examples of structural expressionism. Get ready for a thought-provoking discussion as we delve into street grid and its impact on our understanding. Formulated in the Commissioner's Plan of 1811, New York adopted a visionary proposal to develop Manhattan north of 14th Street with a regular street grid. The economic logic underlying the plan, which called for 12 numbered avenues running north and south, and 155 orthogonal cross streets, was that the grid's regularity would provide an efficient means to develop new real estate property. Frederick Law Olmsted, the designer of Central Park, disapproved. Your feedback helps me improve, so please take a moment to leave a comment or review.